Okay, so welcome, Tracy. Welcome to
Hello.
my non-existent podcast. Um, so I've invited you to have a chat today about soul work, and really the reason behind this is because I'm wanting to um, get underneath this term of soul work and explain and support people to understand what do we mean when we talk about soul work. It's a Soul is a word that's been used forever and ever. Musicians talk about it. Nick Cave always talks about the soul, which I love in his writings. There's the world soul, and then there's also the spiritual marketplace, where there's a
Mm.
lot of talk about personal development and soul and this and that, and how to improve yourself, how to become more alive, and all these sorts of things, all of which are very beautiful. But it can be confusing for people who are wondering, well, what is soul work actually? How do I connect with my soul? So
Mhm.
yeah, just would love you to introduce yourself a little bit, share about who you are and what you're doing, and then maybe we can get into kind of teasing apart what we mean by these big fancy terms.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Tracy. I have a practice called Harmonic Soul. That is my individual session work, my one-on-one kind of soul guidance mentoring work. And it also includes group work. I do a lot around attunement, healing, and coherence.
Mm,
Um, I would say that that's really like the core focus of harmonic soul is how to come into harmonic resonance within oneself and
mm,
how to sound that resonance
mm,
out into the world so that
mm,
there's a harmonic coherent experience of life, of living in this world
mm,
and relating with others and this planet and
mm,
yeah, just life itself.
mm,
Um, yeah, and I think it's like to start us, I think there's actually an importance of differentiating between the work it takes to get to soul
yeah.
and for soul emergence versus the work that your soul is here to do.
Mm,
And those two things are different. And for some souls, the work that their soul is here to do is to help others on that path of
mm,
guidance. I think this is where the wisdom of like the rays comes is super
mm,
useful, but um that's yeah, that's like to make it more digestible. Like there's yeah, it's you can have a vocation and there can be a simplicity of the work that you're doing in the world that your soul is very much shining through.
mm,
And I think that there are very like yeah, there's a multitude of outlets for that to be expressed, and simultaneously we're still quite far from living in a culture that supports
mm,
the soul and the recognition of the soul and the expression of the soul and the
mm,
needs of the soul.
mm, mm. Yeah, thank you. I would love to add that we know each other from deep dives
Mhm.
in mystery school life, and we follow the same stream of teachings, which is a lineage called the Trans-Himalayan teachings, and it talks about many things, and soul is one of them, and one of the um, I guess the founding voices that have channeled these teachings through is Bruce Lyon, and he talks about the soul not being sung in at birth. And what that really means is, how I understand it, is that we live in a culture where it's not always the case that this beautiful baby is born and everyone gathers around and sees through the external form to the deepest part of who this person is and who they can be. and gives it space to flourish and be allowed to express in the world exactly how it's supposed to be. Instead, a lot of us live in this culture of what are you good at and how do we put you into a form and what should you study and you need to make money and get on the train basically to have a successful life, a career, and look after yourself and do the things that many people want to do. But for me, a lot of what soul work is about is actually unpeeling the layers of what we think that we needed to be able to get to what the deepest, truest part of us actually is. And then, like you say, with harmonic soul, like just sound that in the world. And so a lot of what I love about the work that we're involved in is it's actually just about unpeeling gently, like, you know, like rubbing the stuff off the outside so that what's already there can shine. And for that to be so uniquely exquisite, like nobody needs to be the same. And so that's what I personally love about this path. Um, and I also love that you distinguish between the work it takes to get there, to emerge as a more soulful version of ourselves, because that can be a process too. So I wonder if you want to share anything about that process as you understand it.
Yeah, I believe that we come into this world, we have this beautiful cocktail of our body, our family system, our, you know, kind of energetic constitution, the way we move in the world, the way
Mm,
we relate to the world. And it's this it's this mixture of all of these things that are essentially what the soul has needs to work out
mm,
for our own emergence. And what I've found in my own experience is that they become like these little micro superpowers
mm,
when the soul starts to shine through and learns how to work with the trauma that you've experienced, or how to work with the body that you have. Like,
mm,
we're all so physically
mm,
diverse, and um there's so much emphasis on appearance in our culture still, and not so much on like the power that lives in our matter and what the soul is like can do with that,
mm,
of how we can vibrate our souls through our bodies. Um and like, you can look at somebody that has like less mass in their
mm,
physical constitution. A lot of times their soul energy is more external,
mm,
and you know, and they have part of their journey is um like, yeah, deep embodiment, and like the like coming into matter, and what it takes to get all the way in, versus someone who has, yeah, like a lot of density already
mm,
in their matter, and has other challenges of
mm,
breaking up some of that density
mm,
that can display itself as being stuck or stagnation,
mm,
and there's fire that's needed to burn through
mm,
some of that, so that things can be liberated from the body to make space
mm.
for the soul
Yeah.
all the way in. um yeah, and the ways in which we relate to each other are hugely impactful on the soul's ability to come through.
Mm,
And this deep need, this core need of the soul for reflection,
yeah.
um, and the attunement to that, for true
Yeah.
reflection, to really be
Mm,
felt and seen and known as what we truly
yeah.
are in our truest
Yeah.
nature, and kind of that, yeah, that eternal place in our being.
Totally. And I think for people most people, I imagine, can resonate with the idea of having had a teacher or an elder or a family member or whoever it may have been who saw something in them as a child or at any point in their life and called forth a part in them that was really wanting to emerge. When I have listened to many podcasts or books, of the great artists and the poets and the rock stars or the billionaires or whoever, usually there's someone at that in that person's life who's had a deep interaction with them and has seen through the naughty behavior or the kicking out of school or the whatever it may be, the addictions or and 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 has called forth the part in someone that's like, no, that's not really who you are. Like, I see you, I've got my gaze on you in a way that's as fierceful as it is loving. And I feel like that's what so much of our culture is missing. Because if
Mhm.
we had many reflections of that throughout our life, um, then it becomes easier to see, oh, I can see myself through the lens of soul or the lens of the deepest part of who I am and not who my parents might want me to be or my school said that I should do. And I think a lot of the work around soul emergence is really just having reflections again and again and again, either working with people like yourself or doing transformational work or having big bang experiences. It comes in different forms for everybody to be able to see ourselves with a clear mirror, yeah, of truth and not so
Mhm.
much of society projection. Because we're stuffed full of images in the world, like especially growing up now, such a common understanding, of like what social media, etc., is doing to us. But really on a deeper level, um, I feel I was going to say worried. I don't know whether I'm worried, but I feel for young people, I guess, and
Mhm.
I hope that in amongst the melee of external stimulus, people can still receive those direct gazes of, no, I see something unique in you, and let's flower this. Mm,
Mm. Yeah, it makes me think about like the hyper, like here in the States we have this like so much like hyper individualism
mm,
and focus on self, and the difference between that and like the individuation of the soul and like the
mm,
relief that comes when you feel that uniqueness that
mm,
lives in each of our beings be seen and met by another, but also just, yeah, when you can recognize it in yourself and kind of like step out and stand, even just for a moment
mm,
on your own, and feel yourself as part of, but some like individuated,
mm,
the whole, and
mm,
how much relief that brings in
mm,
those moments when somebody sees, like what you're speaking to, and someone can gaze past the masks that we wear, the behavior
mm,
that we display, into that place that is unique to us. And for a moment, we get to feel it. And there's like this breath out of like
mm.
releasing all the energy that it takes to be anything other than that.
Yeah, yeah. I can even feel myself relaxing and yeah, yeah. And maybe let's touch a little bit on the different flavors of soul. So in the teachings that we follow, there's rays, the different
Mhm.
ways that the soul expresses. Um, but I often like to like feel into them as flavors, and I often explain them as flavors because I think it's easier to understand in some ways. Um, so some people are super purpose driven, and some people are driven by love. And so I wonder if you maybe from if you feel like sharing any personal reflections or just from what you see, like how to pick up on the different unique flavors of people.
Yeah, I mean it's a funny like they're like these interesting entry points because so much is still driven by personality desire. And
Mm,
we think, like the purpose driven, like the leadership and
mm,
the places in us that want leadership. But then if you put yourself in that kind of like, if we, I don't know, we can call them like departments, or
mm,
they're like these sectors that encompass a multitude of
mm,
limitless expression.
mhm,
Um, if you talk about something like the artist archetype, and we think about how many different expressions of that there are
mm,
in this world, um, and that's one that's like, in
mm,
art, that and music is I think one of the purest ways that the
mm,
soul sounds itself into the world.
mm,
um, and yeah, I think because we're also in this time of a collective awakening where so
mm,
much transformation is happening at
mm,
an ever accelerated pace on the planet.
mm,
There is so much that is emerging, that is an expression that is in service to love,
mm,
and um and teaching, because there's a hunger of like that something else, like we're more
mm,
than what we have been sort of conditioned to believe that we are.
mm, mm,
and and we don't even know
mm,
really what we are yet. And this process of evolution, of discovering that
mm,
together.
mm,
um and I think that that's why like there's so much saturation in spiritual materialism in the spiritual
mm,
marketplace, and so many voices that are
mm,
emerging, which is beautiful. And it's also that like that fervor of like, I just discovered this thing in
mm,
myself, and now I have to go give it away, in a
mm,
sense.
mm,
And um and like, kind of trying to spin that, because there's just something that has to come out.
mm,
And because our like corporate worlds, or the our capitalist economy is like, don't support those expressions to emerge. And there's like all like so much talk about like exiting the matrix, and
mm,
um yeah, I think that it's like this recognition that systems have to collapse and crumble and die for
mm,
something else to be born. And we're still trying to work within these
mm,
pre-existing structures. And
yeah,
um yeah, and all that comes with like the crisis that can emerge when something that has been built around personality is confronted with the truth that lives in the core of the soul, that
mm,
is that looks and feels and sounds very different than
mm,
what we see so much of in the world.
yeah, totally. And that leads me on to something that I feel very passionately about, which is embodied spirituality. And so I would love anybody watching this to receive or hear that when I believe, when I talk about soul, it's not something that we acquire, or it's something not something outside of us. It's not something that's kind of like um, a tangible thing that's like the jewel at the end of the long road or whatever. Like every single human being on this planet, every tree, every rock, every dog, like I'm obsessed with dogs because I just got a dog. Um, every being is connected to the fabric of life. And to be more technical about it, the world soul. And really, all of us are just an expression of
Mm,
the world soul, which might be a little esoteric to get your head around. But what I have experienced in myself through my journey is this deep dive into spirituality and soulfulness and feeling alive, and actually forgetting that I'm part of the fabric of the everyday. And in some ways it's kind of easier to hang out there when we all speak the same language and we like, follow the same stream. But actually what I'm learning is like how to be the expression of love that I want to be in the world in the everyday and bring it through. And it's really unglamorous sometimes. And it illuminates the part of me that was sometimes striving to get somewhere, that was looking for something, like the archetypal spiritual seeker or searcher that goes off on this like mission of looking for the deep mysteries of life. Like, yeah, I did that and I am that and I will probably always be that. I always want to like lift up these rocks and see what's underneath. But I feel myself more now in the phase of like, okay, how do I bring all this home, and stand for actually what I really believe in a way that integrated, like I've tasted the corporate world. I worked very hard at school. I had a traditional upbringing. I went very much into spirituality and mystery school life, and now the two are converging in a way that feels really beautiful. And I feel like that's where the real work actually begins. It's like, how do we just all, sounds so cliche, but love each other more, like hold ourselves in the crisis that's happening as the world starts to awaken and unfold and different things start to happen with higher and higher intensity and velocity. How do we stay connected to like our own internal truth and our own sense of love when it's easier to do what's cheaper, faster, will make you rich, make you feel like a better person. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I feel the simplicity of service
Mm.
and what you're saying of like, and service in like the sense of like just the mundane, like the
Mm.
absolute mundane of like, the simplicity of like just the service in the home of like the dishes and the laundry
Mm.
to, yeah, being out in the world. I think that there's a key part of um when you start to stabilize in soul and you step back at like because there is a necessity I think on this path of soul emergence where we do need to kind of incubate
Mm. Mm.
and be a baby soul like
Mhm.
and be with some because the soul is fucking powerful. And it's so delicate too. There are parts
Mm.
of the soul emergence that are just so incredibly fine. Like there's like this, like the
Mm.
filigree quality to
Mm.
some of these expressions of our soul that need
Mm.
softness
Yeah.
and stillness and
Mm.
quiet. And they need an environment that fosters that.
Mhm.
And then when it's like it's stable enough and you're like you feel grounded in your body and in your matter,
Mm.
and you can step back out into the world in that vibration of
Mm.
yourself.
Mm.
um, you will also be confronted with the challenge of what it takes to stand in soul. And I think that there's a key piece of that is actually slowing down
Mm.
so much so that you don't get out ahead of yourself and you
Mm.
don't stay behind yourself, and there's a pacing that it takes to stay squarely seated in the seat of your soul in your
Mm.
body in the world.
Mhm. Mm.
And there's a simplicity of that, like if you can simply stay with that,
Mm.
there's a clarity of listening where there's that's your compass.
Mm.
and, and there's a directionality of like because there's a purity that lives in the core of the soul that is just plugged into life itself. And when we're with that, we have an internal guidance system that whether you're like at the grocery store or working with the land or doing your work in the world, like
Mm.
whatever it is that you're doing, it's like to just stay with that, like no matter what the circumstances. And
mm,
that I think is the true challenge of the integration
mm,
of if you go through, if you know, you go deep into the spiritual path and you immerse yourself in work in that way, and then what you're saying of stepping back into the world, yeah, it's like what does it take to stay seated in that, and also to like, yeah, to live from the heart, to meet people from that
mm,
place and to gaze out, like so much is so, yeah, it's so important about around the view of like
mm,
how are you viewing, because when you step out of the little incubator and you go back into the world and there's this exposure to all of the atrocities and the, you know, some of the horror around how we treat
mm,
animals and each other and the
mm,
earth. And yeah, it's like how do you stay with that in the confrontation of
mm,
all of that and just bring it to the simplicity of the mundane of
mm.
life.
Yeah, totally. Can be very grounding. And I feel
Mhm.
to also say for anybody watching, like a big spiritual quest is not always necessary. Like for somebody who might be thinking, okay, well, I don't have the funds or the opportunities or the this or the that, you know, to go on a big adventure and that classic like eat, pray, love archetype, like woman
Yeah,
goes off to find herself.
it's an
And
incredible privilege to be able to do that.
it is totally. And what I find most from everyone I've ever worked with in body work, in mentoring, just in life in general, my own experience, spaciousness is where it's at, allowing us to have the space in our own day-to-day lives so that we can feel ourselves. Because I feel all of us have this compass, this intuition, this deeper knowing, this connection to like what's actually really true, but it gets crowded by expectations, to-do list, busyness, lives, like, and it's like this radio station frequency that comes in. And actually, a lot of what I am finding is um, just clearing the energetic channel is where it's at. For people to be able to
Mhm.
connect with their own intuition, their own knowing, their own creativity. And then obviously there's many other layers and things to come, but to be in the stillness of
Mhm.
who we actually really are, like that the whispers are there if we're able to hear them.
Yeah, there's something, you know, because it's like so like there's like a frenetic vibration that so much of the world operates at. Like if you go to a big city or, you know, it's like all of these tasks and yeah, the work that it takes, like that hum of all of the busyness of the work that is happening on the planet, things that are being created, manufactured. Yeah, just the corporate, this pace of the corporate world and that like super high vibration, you know, sometimes you like if you like I can feel it when I hug someone, how it
Mm,
lives in their body. And it can feel like a leap of terror to like actually slow down, like take a
mm,
breath and come
mm,
underneath that.
mm,
And I think there's, you know, it's a survival thing to stay. If I stop moving at that pace, then I'll die.
yeah.
Like there is some
Mm,
unconscious or not
mm,
um, belief system around that that's a collective
mm,
thought form.
mm,
And what I've found is that the leap is actually not that big. Like it's like the
mm,
drop is actually not that great.
mm, mm,
And sometimes it just takes like what you were saying before, like a gaze behind of like, hey,
mm,
I'm right here.
mhm,
There's something else that's underneath
yeah.
that that's possible in the spaciousness
Mm,
and the stillness and
mm,
just a sip of that, like just to be for a moment, to just be
mm,
oneself and each other.
mm,
They're like these little, like even just like a little micro pause in these
mm,
moments throughout a day,
mm,
how deeply that can impact yeah, not like it like has a huge impact on the nervous system in our bodies,
Mm,
but that sense of self of like, can I locate myself in this mass movement that is
mm,
constantly happening?
mhm. Yeah, totally. And that allows space for personal healing because a lot of soul emergence goes directly in line, hand in hand with personal healing, like the
Hmm.
unpeeling, what I was talking to before of the ways that we armor up or calcify or traumas or things that have happened, abuses, transgressions, the ways that these survival parts of us become um, trained to
Hmm.
protect and get on. And then a little bit of spaciousness, something starts to reveal, but in that unpeeling, can get a little uncomfortable at times because these things start to come up and it's like, wow, like I know for myself, these things come up from my unconscious. And I've been like, what is that thing? That's been living in me for, for years. Like, that's not really me, but I've taken it on as something that I do because I was trying to not feel something or protect something. And having shed a few of them, like there's such a relief in that. But having consistently met new layers and new ones coming up, it's like, wow, God, it never really stops. But that's just, that's just the path, isn't it? Like we're never done. And
Hmm.
I feel like that's a really beautiful and much needed realization that I came to at some point where I realized, oh, I'm trying to get somewhere where I'm never going to get.
Yeah.
It's actually just in the present moment. That's where I need to be.
Mhm. And that's
Mm,
where it all is. It's like the whole spectrum of experience is in one moment of presence.
mm,
And also, yeah, it's like when what you're saying, I can feel in you like where it's like it makes space for joy when you're not
yeah.
trying so hard to yeah to get somewhere, to actually like sit back and take stock of
Mm,
how far you've come and just sit in the appreciation of that and the
mm,
enjoyment and the pleasure of that. I think that's so much of, yeah, the movement is the endless movement. Often it's a survival thing that doesn't want to drop into the feelings underneath, but part of, yeah, those feelings are like the beauty and the joy and the some of the ecstasy of being alive in, coupled with the grief and the fear and the
mm,
and the anger that
mm,
so many, yeah, yeah, it's all
mm,
there together.
mm. Yeah, totally. And that kind of reminds me of a lot of conversation around transformation. And I feel like it's really good to just feel into what do we mean by transformation? Because for me, it's not actually about change, it's about evolution. Like,
Mm.
for sure, change will come. Change always comes when there's an invitation to step into a more authentic way of living. Friendships change, dynamics change, you might move place, like jobs change, things start to become out of alignment as a deeper part comes through, and then it becomes really obvious, oh, okay, I can't do those things anymore. So change is always there, but it's not about change as in you're not good enough as you are or you must be something else. It's so much more about evolution and transformation from a place of revealing, really, which
Mm.
I find incredibly empowering.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah, I love that frame of, yeah, it's kind of like what you were saying earlier about peeling back the layers
mm,
and revealing what's underneath all of that, and you get closer.
mm,
It's really like ultimately it's like we're getting naked, like we're just
mhm,
definitely
Sometimes
peeling
literally.
back more. Yeah. And yeah, and there's a piece here too. And whenever I feel like really feel into what we mean by transformation, I go back to this place where like we're food for life.
Mm,
And and there is a there is a deep significance to each of our individual existences, and the seriousness that in which we take all of this, and ultimately like we're just, and like death being the fulfillment, the ultimate transformation. And yeah, this sense of like we're feeding something so much greater than our individual inner worlds.
mm,
and and there's deep significance in each of
mm,
those
mm,
inner worlds. And I think that transformation is often, yeah, it's like the revelation of like the revealing, like what you're saying, of
mm,
what exists in that inner world,
mm,
and like letting that emerge into the greater context of what
mm,
we're all doing here together.
mm, mm,
and and I think that that's part of the revelation of evolution, and this acceleration that we're in right
mm,
now
mm,
with each other, and to bring out what lives inside of us,
mm,
and to share it. I think that that's one of the most powerful things that I've experienced on this journey with, yeah, and with so many souls like we've journeyed with.
mm,
It's those moments where somebody reveals like the deepest, darkest, sometimes like the most horrid, like hated places within themselves, and the way that it is then received,
mm,
because there's a universality in all
mm,
of it,
yeah.
and the recognition of that. And that's the, like when it gets released and liberated from
Mm,
being so hidden within
mm,
ourselves, and the
yeah.
transformation that takes place in those moments. So
Mm. That's
there's a lot
something that,
to say there.
yeah, that's something that touches my heart so deeply when I've been in these transformational spaces and somebody breaks open in some way and you can just feel they became more free in that moment. And there's just, like some deeper part came forward and some part that wasn't serving fell away. And that just, it makes me feel so alive. That's
Mhm,
why I do this work, is because I want to taste those moments.
mhm,
And yeah, I'm often reminded, of the kind of age old adage of
mhm,
sitting by someone's bedside
mhm,
dying and then realizing like they've been holding on to all this stuff they could have gotten rid of years ago. And I just, from a young age, I've felt like I really don't want that to be me. I really do not want to be on my deathbed, whenever it may be, wishing that I lived more freely, that I was braver, that I loved harder, that I was more adventurous. And as I've gotten older, it's less about experiences. Like, I don't want to taste everything in the world. Like, I'm not a hedonist, and it's okay. It's more about depth and beauty and just living like as
mhm.
the most meaningful, fulfilled, joyful, soulful life that I can live. Yeah, I feel like it's such a simple, exquisite privilege that actually is the universal right for all of us.
Mhm.
But it's, for many reasons, it doesn't always happen. Mm,
Yeah, I feel it, I can feel you in those places of like where the most profound meaningful experiences are in the quiet moments of
mm,
sometimes solitude, a lot
mm,
often solitude,
mm, mm,
and yeah, like these moments that like nobody will ever know about,
mm,
perhaps, but you. And
mm,
there's something heartbreakingly beautiful about
mm,
that, because there can be this recognition in each other, but there's a limitation in the sharing of that. Like
yeah,
there's,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, and that to me is for me personally too, is the harvest
mm,
of why we do this work.
mm,
And is to, yeah, is to be in that fulfillment of life
mm,
itself.
mm. And
Yeah, the
reach for
peace.
others.
Yeah.
Like, come too, like
Mhm.
it's really beautiful in here. Like, I feel way more free. Like, come along and join.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a collective rest that I feel like we're all really fucking longing for
Mm,
in this. um yeah, like this nourishment that comes when I mean, I can feel it right now just being with you. There's
mm,
like, yeah, kind of just like sitting in that space. And when we're there, there's such a generosity
mm,
where it wouldn't matter who approached. It's
mm,
like there's an of courseness of like,
mm,
yes, come.
mm,
Like, yeah, it makes me think about like, when people leave an empty seat at the table because
mm,
you don't know who will show up. And
mm,
yeah, there is a, it's not even so much an inclusion, because like that it just already is. It's like, of course,
mm,
you're here too.
mm. Yeah.
Choice in that of
Mm,
like, yeah, it's available. Yeah, it's available in every moment.
mm,
Sometimes it just takes somebody like holding that
mm,
that yeah, pull of presence.
mm,
Like, here's what's possible.
mm. Yeah, and I feel so gooey, right now. Like, I feel like we're in this like gooey cauldron and we could talk for hours. And um, but this is this is the essence of what I would love to transmit, and I try to with my tantric bodywork that I do. Because yes, you can dress it up with all the tantric sayings and the this and the that and come and have an experience, but really at its core, it's a meeting of something so precious and beautiful, with one person holding deep presence and love, seeing through form, and just pouring devotional love into someone so that something can flower and emerge, whether that's a revelation, an experience, pleasure, whatever it may be. And yeah, that's the reason why I do that work,
Mhm.
is for that, because it's so exquisite when somebody can come and drink from that well, and it's not something that's easily marketable, like you've got to experience it for yourself and trust. Yeah.
Well, and you have a very particular kind of extraordinary, it's one of like your soul gifts, is the way that you meet others in body. That's how you and I really found each other, was our
Mm,
bodies came
mm,
together, and our bodies really
mm,
loved each other. And
mm,
there's a recognition of that pacing that it
mm,
takes to deeply attune and really, really meet someone through the body, where they're
mm,
located, where they are.
mm,
And you have an extraordinary gift, and yeah,
Thank you.
beauty and so much love that comes through
Mm,
your hands and your
mm,
body when you're meeting in that way.
mm, Thank you. Maybe that's why I
Mm.
feel so like I'm like this around most people. And then when someone can feel me like you can, I'm like, ah.
Mm.
Yeah. I feel like we could dive on for hours, but my intention was to have a
Yeah.
chat that's like, so many, everyone's online all the time. And I feel like really long videos can be a little bit off-putting because everyone's maybe a bit saturated with their screen time. So I'm hoping that this is just a dose of some exploration and explanation. And I don't want to say invitation because it sounds corny because I've just said loads of rhyming words, but just, yeah, a way for people to connect with what we talk about, when we talk about soul and these worlds and what they mean to us. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we could be like the two little aunties with their tea, like having a chat
Yeah,
for
we'll
a
be
very
here in
long
60 years.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful to be with you. And yeah, I appreciate the approach of yeah, how to talk about this in a way that feels approachable and digestible.
Mm,
And I don't know if we did that, but
mm,
um, yeah, I think the core, like what you're saying of the meeting of beings, and whether that's two souls in human form or a tree, or yeah, just the
mm,
simplicity of being with life in that way, of the recognition of what what we really are, who we
mm,
really are, and
mm,
the rest that comes in that when
mm.
yeah, when we don't have to be anything other than that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
what I
think
long for.
just a relief and even the concept of that. I'm like, ah,
Mhm.
thank you so
Thank
much. I'm going to
you.
post your links and things like that if people want to find you underneath. And yeah, I just love you and appreciate you and very grateful to be
So
weaving
much.
on this path with you.
Same. Thank you. Mwah.
Bye.